What's going on YouTube? It's your boy Wiggs. Back with a different kind of video here. I wanted to, while I'm making these playthroughs, do a Pokemon game tier list. And, before I get into things, just know that this is my opinion. If you have a differing opinion, that's perfectly fine. But I would like to know where you guys kind of have differences of opinion on this. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. I am going to go in chronological order, generation-wise. And keep in mind too that where I rank these games, you have to remember the context of the times when they were made. For example, with Red and Blue right here, it was the first ever Pokemon game, so you just have to understand that I can't rank Red and Blue the same that I would Scarlet and Violet, just based on the technological differences of the times. But yeah, Red and Blue, and I have played them. I am gonna give them a B tier, and the reason why is that yes, they did lay the foundation for the series, but they are kind of a buggy and a gameplay mess. And what I mean by that, the bugs are pretty self-explanatory, but the psychic type was ridiculously overpowered, and the bug types were insanely weak. And then lastly, the critical hit chance was based on the Pokemon's speed. So say, it limits your team building if you have slower Pokemon. Obviously, you'd want to use, in this game, a Persian over a Rhydon. It's just a little bit odd that they did that, but, hindsight's 2020. Otherwise, the game's pretty good. So, Pokemon Yellow, on the other hand, I have not played. It seemed like the enhanced version of Red and Blue, just trying to follow the anime a bit more, but yeah. I haven't played it, or you know what, I'll just go ahead and put Pikachu and Eevee. I haven't played that either. But, probably dog shit, to be honest. So, Gen 2 is Gold and Silver, and they go in A tier. It's basically the same thing as Red and Blue in terms of what I like about the games, but they're less buggy. And the only real downsides, because the content of the game is incredible, is the level curve and how they treat new Johto Pokemon. And what I mean by that is that they basically just kick down the road a lot of new Jotonian Pokemon, I guess how you say it, but like Houndour, for example. You can't use it in the main game. Why would you relegate a new Pokemon to the previous region in Kanto? It makes no sense at all why they would do that. You know what? Actually, now that I think about it, I'm going to put Gold and Silver in B and Crystal in A. Crystal made some improvements. The only thing that I really hate about it is you can't catch Mareep. Why can't you catch the Mareep line? It's so dumb and nearsighted. I really don't understand that at all. But yeah, good games, especially for the times. Very good games for the times. Okay, moving on to... Actually, what? I do want to get the kind of non-mainline games out of the way. So Colosseum, I played it a little bit. I haven't played the whole way through, but the reason why, oh god no, is because it's C tier. I think the concept of the game is really good, but it takes way too long to purify Shadow Pokemon. The story is pretty good, but it's short, and the level curve is disgustingly bad, and that's in tandem with how slow the game is. So it's grindy, but it's slow. That's a terrible combination. Gale Darkness, on the other hand, fixes some of that. It's still, slow, but it's not nearly as grindy, and it's way easier to purify Shadow Pokemon. So, and, in Colosseum, you can only have, I think, 40 Shadow Pokemon that you can use, so that really limits your team building. And XD, they double that. It's still not great, but it's good, and I have a lot of memories playing it. It's a good game. You can pour hours into it. It's not, top of the line, but I would say for non-mainline Pokemon games, it's probably the best out there, outside of maybe Pokemon Ranger, but that's not on this list. So Yeah, Ruby and Sapphire. I'm going to put Ruby and Sapphire in B tier. I think that, it's a soft reboot esque of the series at the time. People didn't like that, but in hindsight, it was a perfect decision. I think that Ruby and Sapphire are really good games that were just elevated by Emerald. Put countless hours into these games. I think these were the first Pokemon games that I actually bought. I started with Diamond and Pearl, but kind of went backwards after that to Gens 1 through 4. And Ruby and Sapphire, I put tons and tons and tons of hours into the game. And I think that I can understand why Gen 1ers didn't like it at the time, but that was so nostalgia based that when you look back at it, Gen 3 was really good. And I think Leaf and Green came out after Ruby and Sapphire. And I see Fire Red and Leaf Green as like the definitive version of Kanto. It's pretty faithful to the original games, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. They just were able to fix the bugs, make the, gameplay a lot better, fix the gameplay glitches. Psychic types are still a little overpowered, but there's not much that they could do about that just because they can't go back and, change like Beedrill's stats, for example, to make it a viable option against psychic types. But it doesn't feel like they're insanely overpowered, because there are ways to counter them if, say you have a strong physical attacker for Sabrina's Alakazam. It's just, she's probably just going to use Future Sight. But, the game is a lot better than the original Red and Blue. So maybe Red and Blue doesn't deserve to be in B, but, I think it does. So, yeah, I'm not going to move it. And then next is Emerald. I think that's an obvious S tier. Like I said, Ruby and Sapphire were really good games, but Emerald just perfected its formula and made it into one of the greatest Pokemon games of all time. I don't really think that there needs to be much said about it. They added the Battle Frontier, for example, too. That's a major addition to the game. They gave May a better team. I think the only downside with Emerald compared to Ruby and Sapphire is that Wallace is the champion rather than Steven. The good side of it, or the good thing about that is you can at least fight Steven still in the post game as like a final boss, but it doesn't have the same weight to it, and he doesn't have the champion theme either. So I don't know. That's really my only complaint with Emerald, but otherwise, incredible games. Okay, moving on to Diamond and Pearl. Like I said, these were the first games that I ever got. I got them on Christmas one year and put so many hours into them. But, with hindsight, they're C tier. If I look at them compared to these other games, they're pretty bad. Just because there's a limited Pokedex, the game is obnoxiously slow. It feels like Game Freak tried to do everything possible to prevent you from progressing through the game, basically. Yeah, there's only 150 Pokemon in the Pokedex, and, while that's not bad, something like Fire Red and Leaf Green, it's a lot different in Diamond and Pearl, which is going on to the DS, it's Generation 4. I just feel like they had a misstep right there. It's not like Black and White where the entire Pokedex was the new region. You still had some old Pokemon mixed in, but it really limited, team variability. It felt like everybody used the same Pokemon. So, not the biggest fan of Diamond and Pearl. I will never play them again. But Platinum, on the other hand, S tier. It's actually, you know what? I'm going to put it... No. Okay, I'd do that. Platinum is the top of S tier. It's unequivocally one of the greatest Pokemon games of all time. It fixed everything, really, with Diamond and Pearl. Increased the Pokedex size, sped up the gameplay, made the game a bit harder, honestly. I know that Cynthia had her levels lowered from her Diamond and Pearl team, but the team is tougher to beat. It's a better game. They added the Distortion World, the Giratina storyline. It's just much, much better. Not only story-wise, but pacing-wise, fighting Fantina as the third gym leader rather than the fifth. It's just a lot of good changes that they made. They basically just fixed all the mistakes that Diamond and Pearl made, and If Diamond and Pearl didn't make those mistakes, they would probably be in S tier as well. But that's the reason why Platinum exists. It's the definitive version, so that's all that really needs to be said. Heart Gold and Soul Silver, A tier. And the reason why I will put them above Fire Red and Leaf Green is that they suffer really from the mistakes made by Gold and Silver. And I think that Game Freak made not necessarily an extremely faithful remake, such as Fire Red and Leaf Green or Brilliant Diamond and Shiny Pearl, but they still had the two major mistakes of the game, which is relegating Johto new Pokemon to the end of the game or Kanto, and then the level curve is awful. They didn't fix anything in Kanto. It's still a slog to get through. It feels like it's a barren wasteland. They didn't fix Lance's team, where he still has 3 Dragonite. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. If you fought every trainer in the game, you would probably be at the end of the game like a level 50, mid 50s to 60, low 60s, while Red has a mid 80 average team. Makes no sense, and there's no way to grind effectively. There's no Versus Seeker, for example. It's just level 20 wild Pokemon that give you 300 experience per fight. It's just a mess. And if they fixed those things, it would have been so much better. And then also, the evolution stones. You can't buy them anywhere. You can hardly acquire them. The way to get them, for the most part, is to have a trainer that you fight give it to you after a variable amount of time. You have no idea how long it'll take. They'll call you and say, hey, I have this item for you. And you go get it. It's just arbitrary and antiquated. Other than that, if they didn't have those weaknesses, Heart Gold and Soul Silver would be the best Pokemon games of all time. But those weaknesses bring it down 2 tiers for me. Still, I love the games to death. I put in so many hours to them. They're amazing. But you have to recognize the weaknesses of them. But, moving on. Black and White, S tier. Ever since I got the games, I don't really have many issues with them. I know that the Gen 1 boomers, when it came out, didn't like that it was effectively a reboot of the series because there were no prior generation Pokemon in the main game, but I think that was a masterful idea by Game Freak because they wanted to craft a story-driven game. Every other Pokemon game had a story, but it was like the game didn't revolve around it. It was kind of just a secondary thing. And this time around, the story is the main focus. The Unova region is the main focus. So you had to have only Unovan Pokemon in it. I realize that some people, didn't like that, and it makes sense, but there are incredible games for that, and you have the prior generations in the post-game. So, if you guys watch my playthrough, I sing the game's praises all the time. I love replaying it. Even with the only 150 Pokemon, it has high replayability. So, if you still don't like Black and White, play it again, see if you change your mind. Black and White 2 is the reason why I created S+. It's the best Pokemon games of all time. No ifs, ands, or buts. They have content that's less than Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but doesn't have the major downsides that Heart Gold and Soul Silver do. The story is not on the level of Black and White, but it's more consistent. And you have prior generation Pokemon in the game. I think their dex is 310, maybe, somewhere in that range. But there's plenty of Pokemon to use to create team viability and variability. They pretty much made the games better from Black and White in every way possible. Literally the only downside to the game is PokeStar Studios. When I think of the games, that is literally the only downside I can think of, because it has a post-game packed with content, a main story that is really good. It has everything in a Pokemon game that you want. It's challenging enough to where, or you can even put it on challenge mode to where you can have extra kick to it that other Pokemon games don't have. They're the only ones to have differences in difficulty. That means easy, normal, and challenge mode. Why couldn't that be the norm going forward? Just feels like they got lazy. Game Freak got lazy after that. So I don't know. I don't see any other Pokemon game that can match it. So yeah, Pokemon X and Y, probably, in my opinion, the most polarizing Pokemon games, I would say, just because they are very easy and the gym leaders do suck. And you do fight the rival a lot, Serena or Callum, just like Black and White. But still really enjoy the games. Putting it in A. You could disagree with it. It's the bottom of A. So maybe if I had a B plus tier, I'd put it in there. Because the games are too easy. The gym leaders are terrible. It makes no sense why they're so bad. And there is no post game, really. Like, it's a bare bones post game. But the main story is, it's mid, but the gameplay is fun. There's so much Pokemon variability. The Pokedex is really good. And in my opinion, that's what makes a good Pokemon game, is having enough Pokemon to catch and use so the game has replayability and it's fun. Because people always crap on the story. Then what are you talking? Did Heart Gold, and Silver have a story? No, it was a nuisance to fight Team Rocket. Fire Red, and Leaf Green, same thing. Emerald had a semblance of a story with Team Aqua and Team Magma to where it actually felt like there was a climax, but that's about as far as it went. Same with Diamond and Pearl. They're not great stories. You had Black and White that is the epitome of it, and maybe that's why people didn't like X and Y and harped on its story, because it was immediately after the Black and White 2 games, which would make sense. But when you compare X and Y to the entirety of the series, it makes no sense to have its story as a main negative to the games, when you could apply that to pretty much the rest of Pokemon history. I think it's a really bad criticism of the games, but saying they're easy, the gym leaders suck, and there's no post game, 100%. Other than that, they're really good games, and I wish Pokemon Z came out to fix those mistakes, but never gonna happen, it looks like, unless the remakes do that eventually. Now we come to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. S tier. Bottom of S tier. I think that Pokemon Emerald is better for only one reason. They had the Battle Frontier. Don't know why Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire Game Freak chose in those games not to have it. Other than that, it's like a reimagination of Hoenn, and it's really, really good. They added Mega Evolution. They added Pokemon from other regions right before the Elite Four, so if you want to change your team up a little bit or make it even better, you could do that. I think it's a really good change. But it's held back by not having a Battle Frontier. But the post-game with the Delta episode is really good. And you know what? The Battle Frontier, does it outweigh the good changes that ORAS made? Now that I think about it, I am going to put Emerald at the bottom of S tier. Obviously, it doesn't take any away from the games, but I'm going to put ORAS just slightly above Emerald. Yeah, sue me. Pokemon Sun and Moon. Very polarizing games as well. I will tell you this. The first playthrough that I had of Sun and Moon, if that was how I felt about the games going forward, easy S tier. They were so much fun. But once you play it again, you just realize how much of a slog it is to play through. Not only are the games very long, but the cutscenes, as everybody knows, are terrible and unskippable. Hal, as a rival, is kind of a pest more than anything. I think the Kahunas were a really good idea, having trials. I like that. I'm not somebody that's like a boomer where you had to have gym leaders, but I think it was a nice change of pace, and the Pokedex is pretty good. But it just felt like the game forced so many unnecessary things down your throat, like, say, Mantine surfing. I like it, but do I want to have to do it in every single playthrough? No. Just transport me to the other island. It doesn't make any sense. And then I can't remember what it's called, like the Crown Plaza or something like that, that's mandatory. It's basically the Gen 7 version of PokeStar Studios. And I don't think it's in Sun and Moon, but I do believe it's forced on you in Ultra Sun and Moon. The games are challenging, which I like. The story is pretty good, but I can only play the games like once every 2 years because I can't stand playing through it. And it's like, oh wow, I want to play Gen 7, but then when you're in it, you're like, oh man, this is a mess. It's more of a slog to me than Diamond and Pearl. And that is really bad. The saving grace, though, is everything else that I said. So both these games go into B tier. Ultra Sun and Moon did make some improvements, a la making the Pokedex better, but they kind of water down the story, and that's a major misstep, in my opinion. So Ultra Sun and Moon made some improvements, but overall, it's on the same level of Sun and Moon, which is B tier. I really wish I could rank the games higher, but I can't. They just have too many mistakes that make the game slog down, and it's like an awful pace. Sword and Shield. Actually, you know what? I am gonna mess around with this stuff here. Put it there. Put you there. Okay. And Ultra Sun and Moon are better than Sun and Moon, just barely. Yeah, Red and Blue, Gold and Silver. The context of the times, they're better games. Sword and Shield are extremely polarizing as well. I didn't play them until about 2021. I didn't get a Switch until then. I was kind of not necessarily checked out from the Pokemon series, but I didn't keep up with it like I did before, and I do now. But when I played Sword and Shield, I didn't have any of the outside hate. Like, I didn't see any of it. So I played the game from an unbiased perspective, just as a Pokemon fan. And, oh god, voice crack, sorry. They're good games. I'll say it. Is the Dex controversy bad? Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know why you had to relegate the other half of the Pokedex to paid DLC. I think that's really stupid. Even though the paid DLC is pretty fun. I don't agree with that business decision, but I know Game Freak is going to Game Freak. They're going to try to milk every dollar out of you. It's graphically not incredible, but it is a finished game, which cannot be said for all of the succeeding games after Sword and Shield. The story is meh, it's just there, and it's not a great thing, but I didn't feel like it needed to be a great story to be a good game. The wild area is pretty fun. Is it kind of awkward and disjointed? Yes, it is. But I like the raid den battles. I poured so much time into those. And the Dynamax adventures and the post-game, or the DLC, is good. I wish there was more of a post-game, but, like I said, that's paid DLC. And that's probably going to be the norm going forward. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. But it just is what it is. But the games themselves are pretty good. The starters are kind of lower tier compared to other generations, but it's okay, So because of that, I am going to put them, Sword and Shield, in B tier. They're solid games. They're not incredible. They're not terrible, but they're good. They're just good. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are probably the biggest disappointment in Pokemon history. So you already know, putting it in D tier. I can't put them in E because I did enjoy playing them. There's not a Pokemon game, I'll just say this, that I played that I didn't like. But Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are close enough to it. They're a buggy mess. They're not a slog to play through, but they're just awkward. Like, I bumped around on everything, everywhere. The Pokemon Falling feature, I don't use it because it's so bad. It's terrible. Like, how do you, as a game dev or a play tester, not say, wow, this is really bad, it should probably be fixed, and it's just not. The music's good. The story is the exact same. They did put the Platinum Pokemon in the Grand Underground, which is a good change. I like the Grand Underground, but they didn't change anything with the story at all. The teams, the terrible teams because of the terrible Pokedex in Diamond and Pearl, are the exact same, which is bad. The pacing is the exact same, which is bad. It's just, when you have Diamond and Pearl, And on top of that, a buggy mess. It's a bad game. Because Diamond and Pearl at least ran well. And it looked good. The art style in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is not good. Why would you have the art style from the game that came out 15 years earlier when you're 2 consoles ahead of where it was? Make the games look like Sword and Shield. God, I cannot talk right now. But if you did that, it would have gone a long way in mitigating a lot of the criticisms that people had, because it would be a major step up, a true remake of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. But the games just felt like a cash grab. They were outsourced to a different company, which was the first time in Pokemon history that's happened, for a mainline game at least, which is unfortunate. And clearly that studio, who knows if they were under strict guidelines by Game Freak to do what they did, but if they had free reign for design choice, never give them the IP again to make a game. Never. It's really bad. So, yeah, Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is the game that Game Freak was developing in favor of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, is S tier. Put it above Emerald. Legends Arceus is really good. It's a totally different take on the Pokemon series, and I really enjoyed it. It's hard to describe, but the story is very good. The content in the game is very good because you have all of the quests outside of the main story. The gameplay loop is a lot of fun, catching Pokemon, and I think the main criticism I have of the game was the battle system. I don't understand it still to this day. I think it's very stupid. It kind of reminds me of Red and Blue's Critical Hit. As long as you have really fast Pokemon, you'll be able to go more. You'll be able to have more turns, but it doesn't still feel like that way. It's very weird, and I've never totally figured it out, and that's a big issue, or it would be if you had more battles. It's not supposed to be a game where you battle a lot. It's not your conventional Pokemon game, and I really like that. The music in the game is incredible. The fan service is pretty good, which is not necessary, but it's nice to have. And yeah, pretty good games. And I hope they make another Legends game in a different region, because it'd make improvements graphically. The graphics could have been better. That's for damn sure. It looks like a GameCube game, but the gameplay itself is really good. But Game Freak needs to figure out its graphics issue, because with Scarlet and Violet, that is why it is the bottom of C tier. When I first played Scarlet and Violet, I liked them. And I looked over the bugginess and the graphics because I was so excited to play the games and I had so much hype. But upon my second playthrough, it's so noticeable. It takes away from the gameplay experience when you go at 15 FPS, or you're running in an open field with Koraidon or Miraidon, and Pokemon just pop up 5 feet in front of your face. You didn't know they were there, they just pop up because the textures and the game itself just can't load. Anywhere you go, it's got to black out to render. The game's render distance is horrendous. The graphics themselves, just in general, are really bad. Scarlet and Violet, I started a series on my YouTube channel. I don't know if I can finish it, just because it's so painful to play through, because the graphics make the game slower, and the game is just slow in general. It really is. Why does Game Freak want to waste our time? It's what it feels like. They just want to waste our time. And it bogs the game down so much. Is it kind of challenging? Yeah, I guess. The champion is dog shit, but Nemona's a good rival. The gym leaders are decently tough. I love the open world, but hate that it's not level scaled. How is it an open world if you can technically choose where you want to go, but that's not the case. There are level caps set in stone for every boss battle in the game. There is a set structure of it. It's just under the guise of an open world because that was the main, advertising feature was the open world. The terrestrialization I like. It's a good feature. It's a good gimmick, but The games themselves are severely unpolished and almost as much of a slog to get through as Sun and Moon, but they don't have very many redeeming qualities. I think that the Terra raids are better just because they're faster and timed rather than focused on your Pokemon or your ally Pokemon fainting. Yeah, that's a good change. But yeah, next time Game Freak, making a truly open world game that isn't a graphical mess. Hopefully it's on a different console. I think they can do it because they've had great graphics in the past. Just look at X and Y. They swapped to 3D and it was gorgeous. Where has that gone? It's a shame. So, yeah, that is my tier list. I had a lot of fun making it, and now that I look at it, I don't think I would really move anything around. I think that Platinum is a great gatekeeper to S plus. Crystal is a great gatekeeper to S. Ruby and Sapphire are good gatekeepers to A. Coliseum is a good gatekeeper to C. And Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are down at the bottom of the barrel where they belong. So, hope you guys enjoyed watching. Please leave a like and subscribe. And like I said, leave a comment. Tell me where you agree, where you disagree. I really want to hear y'all's feedback because I think it's an interesting topic. So, yeah. Until next time, have a good one.